today we will be looking at, this is going to be our first lesson in our CodingBat course, and it is going to be on, CodingBat. And so the main focus of this course is going to be practicing kind of what we've learned in the past kind of 10 lessons, I think, or 12 lessons rather. And we want to practice all the skills because just because we learned these skills doesn't necessarily mean that we have mastered these skills yet. And in practicing, you can easily get more familiar, and by kind of looking at how we would do it ourselves, then you guys can kind of get an idea of how to kind of finish the rest of the warm-ups inside these CodingBat exercises. So actually, if I were to step out here and look, there's this entire section called Warm-Up 1. And if we take another step back, we can see that there's a total of 8 sections for this kind of CodingBat course. So remember, all you need to do if you want to access this course is just Google CodingBat, and once you Google it, you'll have this over here, and you'll see you have CodingBat Java, and so you can just go ahead and click on this. And over here at the top, you can see that there's a Java section and there's a Python section. So we're not going to worry about this Java section for now. All you need to do is go ahead and click into Python, and there should be a box up here that says login, or like create an account, I guess. And you want to log in order for you to be able to kind of save your answers, because you never want to lose all your work. And one quick note about this website is that you should always remember to log in, because it will automatically log you out. And if you don't log in, then your work will not be saved, and it would be, I would imagine, very annoying if your work did not save and you would have to recode everything in order to make sure that you got the right answers, right? So what we are going to be looking at today is going to be sleep in, monkey trouble, and sum double. So these 3 kind of sets of problems are the problems that we are going to be going over this class, and we suggest that you go ahead and you practice some of the questions in warm-up 1. Obviously, you can do all of them. We suggest you do at least probably 3 of them in order to make sure that you kind of get the good idea of it. But if you have any extra time, or say you don't understand the concepts completely, then I suggest you go ahead and you just go ahead and finish warm-up 1. Next class, we may go over some of the questions over here just to make sure that so if you guys were to do the questions yourselves, you can kind of check your solutions with ours, because by checking your solutions, you can always make sure that you did it in the most efficient way. Now, a lot of these questions that we see over here are going to be solved, they can be solved in multiple ways. And so what I mean by that is there's always multiple ways to do something in programming. There's more efficient ways and there's less efficient ways. And in our case, we're going to be trying to showcase the most efficient ways in order to program. So what I mean by efficient is you have to type less. So simplifying your code, not having to define variables or repeat certain statements, that's all part of making the most efficient code possible. And in every case, we want to make sure that we go ahead and we create the most efficient program that we possibly can, because by saving time we can focus on other things, right? So we're going to be going into our first problem today, which is going to be sleep in. So I'll let you guys kind of read the directions at the top, so that it's going to be this kind of short segment right here. And after you read over it, I can kind of explain the key points in this program, in this paragraph that we're going to be looking for when we program. Now that you guys have kind of gone over the question, so this is going to be kind of the explanation of the problem, and these are going to be the cases that they give you, right? So in this problem, we can see that they say the parameter weekday is true, right? So we already know there's going to be at least one parameter in weekday, right? And we can see that there's a certain case that's talking about here. We can see that there's a second parameter, vacation. Now, I'm pretty sure that when you are programming this for yourselves, they will have this part written in for you, stating this, I believe. And this is going to be kind of the basics of our function right here. So if we were to kind of have a blank template, we would still want to know, okay, what is exactly happening in this program. So remember, don't ever jump to conclusions based on the names that you see in the program, because it can always be slightly misleading, right? So we can see that throughout this entire kind of paragraph, we only see two parameters. We see the parameter of weekday, and we see the parameter of vacation. So automatically, when we see parameters, right, that means that we're going to be using a function. Now, for those of you who listened to last class, a function is going to be that kind of short program. And so you may be wondering, well, why is this online site making us write a function? Well, when we write a function, typically we are looking for the most efficient way in order to input and output certain numbers, right? So in this case, what this site wants to do is it wants to test as many cases as possible. And we'll see that later when we press this go button here at the end of programming this problem. But in order for them to be able to kind of enter in all these cases, they want to make sure that they can be able to enter in a certain standardized way. Because if they were to give you kind of a blank template, there's many different ways a programmer could allow a user to enter in certain different values. But we gotta remember that the CodingBat website is not just any user. This CodingBat website is going to be kind of the user that it doesn't really think. It only has one way that it can enter in certain values. So by standardizing it and using a function and parameters, we learned that when we call a function, there's a certain line that we use to call that function. And by writing out, okay, well, the function has to be named sleepin, and it has to have exactly two parameters. Now, technically speaking, you can change the names of these two parameters here, as long as you have two parameters. There's not really any purpose they serve other than reminding you what the kind of values that they're holding, right? So this is kind of a very important part of the program, and so there's obviously going to be two ways we can kind of detect whether there's a function. Either we see the parentheses with the parameters inside of it, or we see def, right? So that's kind of the basics or the premises of how CodingBat works kind of behind the scenes. And so that kind of should give a good explanation as to why CodingBat uses functions in order for you to program your code into it. Now, since we know that CodingBat uses functions, what are some special things that we have to pay attention to? Well, since we know that it feeds in information through the parameters, we now know that in order for us to kind of access the information, all we have to do is pull it from these two parameters. So if we wanted the value of weekday, we would know all we have to do is just call weekday. Now the second thing that we have to pay attention to is when we program inside of this, we actually have to indent it in order for all the code here to be inside of this function. Right, so now that we know that the code has to be inside of this function, we can make sure that we don't make that indentation mistake. And thirdly is going to be that we have to return something. Now, what I mean by return something is, like, if we were to write, say, a basic hello world program, where we print hello world to the console, all we're going to have to do is simply write print and then whatever we want inside of it. Now this can be anything from, say, a variable holding a value where it would just print the value. It can be a string, it can be an integer, it can vary, right? But in this case, what's going to happen is we are going to want a specific type. So in this case, we are going to want either a true or a false. Essentially, we're going to want a Boolean value, right? And in order for the kind of computer to know, okay, well, this guy is trying to return a Boolean value, we can't just go ahead and print it, because when we print it, it's essentially just printing the value to the console. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to return the value. So what's happening behind the scenes is essentially this program has a program underneath it, and that program is calling sleepin with its different parameters. And I would imagine that it would either store it as a variable or run it directly into an if statement. And when it runs it through that, essentially what it will do is it will check the value. And in order for this function to give a value, it needs to return it. And in order to return a value, all we need to do is just type out return. So say all we needed was one line, we would only need to say return true or something like that. So that's kind of how we can make sure that we don't mess up with this kind of function format, I guess. So now I guess let's get started with the actual logic behind this program. So we can see that there's the first case where the parameter weekday is true. So we gotta you can either write this down or you can try to remember in your head. Obviously, in these simpler programs, it's going to be possible to keep it in your head, but as the programs kind of get more complicated, it can be easier for you to just write it down, right? So if the parameter weekday is true, which means that it is a weekday, and the parameter vacation is true, then that means that we are on vacation. So that is going to be our first case, right? So what this means is that if it is a weekday, then if it is a vacation, that means that we are on vacation. Now the second case is going to be we sleep if it is not a weekday or we are on vacation, right? So essentially this kind of overlaps over the first one in a way, in that we sleep if it is not a weekday, and the only two types of days in a week are going to be weekdays and weekends, right? So essentially we're going to assume that, well, if it's not a weekday, or if the value of weekday is false, then it's going to be a weekend. And when it's a weekend, then we are on vacation, right? And the second part of this sentence is going to be we are on vacation. So vacation is kind of like an override command, I guess, in that no matter if it is a weekday or a weekend, and vacation is true, then that means that we are on vacation. And when we are on vacation, then we sleep in. So what it wants us to do is it wants to return true only if we aren't sleeping in. So the cases in which we're going to be sleeping in are going to be A, when vacation is true and it is a weekday, B, if it is a weekend. So a really easy way for us to program this in is going to be if not weekday or vacation, right? So this is going to return true. Else we can return false. So let's go over these lines of code really quick. So we can see if not weekday, right? So this is going to be kind of the first part of it. So in order to make this more clear, we can kind of put parentheses around it. So we can see if not weekday, right? So the case that is a weekend. And if it is not a weekend, or essentially it is a weekday, the vacation comes into play. So if the value of vacation is true, then it can still pass this if statement, right? So this covers both of the cases that we kind of see and we have to cover, and so it allows us to return true. Now we see this else over here, which means every single other case will return false. Now what we can do is we can just go ahead and run it, and we can see that there are these 4 cases that it runs, and it returns true or correct in all of them, right? So over here we can see that there's three kind of cases over here. And what's so good about CodingBat is it gives you these example cases. So what we can do is we can just run through them ourselves, and we can see, well, does my program produce what CodingBat wants it to produce? So I'll let you kind of look at these cases for a second and run through these lines of code real quick. So now that you guys have had a kind of good look at this, so we can see that obviously they will follow all the cases, as these cases tested here are also tested over here, right? So in these kind of easier problems, in that the inputs are going to be Boolean, right? So we have false, false, we have true, false, we have false, true, and the last case is going to be true, true, right? So there's only so many cases that can be tested. Now, we're going to go over how we are going to be able to kind of track this when the input values are no longer Boolean, or they can be strings or integers. And in that case, you can no longer kind of run a test for every single possible case. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to kind of test all these special scenarios, right? So the special scenarios being the unique ones, or ones that bring out kind of new outputs or new returns, right? So you want to make sure you test every single case possible. And this is true not only in CodingBat, but in real programming as well. In many different projects, you're going to want to be able to test every single possible case that could prove to be a problem for your program, right? So one last key thing is that we can actually just go ahead and delete this else statement. And when we delete this else, that means that we need to hit the backspace over there so it is not tabbed over. And what this does is essentially, if this does not pass the if statement, then it will just return false. And the reason why we can do this is because else is almost like a repetitive part of this if statement. And what I mean by repetitive is, if you were to delete it, your program would essentially just work just fine. And the reason for this is because the else statement is kind of just like a hang-off statement. There's no condition, there's nothing special about it. It's just returning the kind of rest of the program. And when it returns the rest of the program, oftentimes the else statement can be better for logic-wise. So if you were to kind of think of how a program would be written, many times you would think of an else kind of statement, or the else part of the if statement. And it's natural for you to do this. And of course, there's no necessity in deleting the else, as it doesn't necessarily create too much hassle, but it's always good to kind of look out for anything that you can kind of delete in the case that you want it to look kind of nice. Now, a mistake that you might make when you write this program for yourself is that you might not put say an or, and instead you would write two different if statements, right? Or you might put a and statement and see if it's a weekday and vacation, when in reality, if it's vacation, it overrides every single kind of other condition, and the only other condition in this being weekday. So this is going to be our kind of official solution for this program, and I'll let you look over this, and then we can move on to the next problem.
This next problem is called monkey trouble. We have two monkeys, A and B, and the parameters A smile and B smile indicate if each is smiling. We are in trouble if they are both smiling or neither of them are smiling. Return true if we are in trouble. In the first line, we already have def monkey trouble, comma B smile, parentheses, colon. This basically
So,
allows us to use the
okay, now we can move on to the next problem. And so this will be presented by Daniel. So let me open up that window real quick. Here it is. Okay. And we can go.
Okay. So I'll just read everything again. We have two monkeys, A and B, and the parameters A smile and B smile indicate if each is smiling. We are in trouble if they are both smiling or neither of them are smiling. Return true if we are in trouble. In the first line, we already have deaf monkey trouble, parentheses A smile, comma B smile, parentheses, colon. This basically allows us to use the variables A smile and B smile in our program, which represent both of the monkeys. The first step in solving this problem to just get started is to just write the statements for the possibilities that will return true, which are if the parameters A smile and B smile are both true or both false. We can start off by writing an if statement, which is if A smile and B smile, which means if A smile and B smile are true, and then after that, and under it, we write return true. This will make it so if A smile and B smile are both true, then it will go into the statement and it will return true. We can do the same for if they're not true. So if not A smile and not B smile, return true. Now that we have both of the loops, they will filter out the possibilities that we are return true or we are in trouble. So what about the possibilities that aren't true? Well, after everything at the very end, we can write return false. So for all the possibilities that aren't true, they'll just go to the very end and return false. Like mentioned before, in programming, people like to keep things very short. So let's see if we can compress the code we have written. We can think about it like this. The first if statement says if a smile, if one monkey and the other monkey are both smiling, then we are in trouble. And the second statement says if both of the monkeys are not smiling, then it's also true, and we're also in trouble. When they are both smiling or both not smiling, they both have the same expression. So we can just write if A smile equal to B smile, which means if A smile and B smile have the same value. So if A smile is true and B smile is true, they'll both have the same value, which is true, and then they'll return true. This is the same case for if they both have the value of false. We can then further shorten it into return A smile, return A smile is equal to B smile. How this works is that if A smile is equal to B smile, we will be returned true because in this case, the code will return the statement inside the parentheses. And since a smile equals b smile, we'll get true. If we were to substitute, if a smile was equal to b smile equal true, we could substitute that, and we could look at it as return true, like that. And the same thing would happen if a smile and b smile were both false. And then if we run this, we should get the correct answer.
Righty, so that wraps up our kind of little section on the next problem. And so now we're going to be moving on to the problem after that. So let's just get that up. Alright. Okay. This is the question. So Pranav will be teaching this one.
Okay, so the first step in solving this problem is analyzing the instructions. So I'll give you a minute to try to read and understand the instructions yourself. Okay, so here it says with two integer values, give their sum. This is just basic addition with one condition. The condition is if the two values are the same, return double their sum. For example, if the two numbers are 6 and 6, you would have to return 24 because 6 plus 6 is 12, and then double that is 24. So we start off by defining the function sum double. If you don't remember, a function's a block of code which only runs when it's called. You can pass data known as parameters into a function, and it can return data as a result. The functions may also receive arguments, and arguments are variables passed from the caller to the function. And in this problem, there are two arguments, a and b. A is the first integer value, and b is the second integer value. We want all code after we define the function to be part of the function. So we have to make sure to indent all that code. You see here, all of this is indented. So after defining the function, I used a variable. Variables are basically containers for storing data values. So the values might change over time, and that is why it's called a variable. So the name of this variable is sum, and I assign the value a plus b to it. Remember, in Python, variables do not need to be declared with any particular type and can even change type after they've been set. And by type, I mean string, integer, boolean, and etc. So now let's think about the condition part. When talking about conditions in programming, you would probably think of one thing. I'll let you think about what that one thing is. Yes, it's the thing that was used in the previous problems. It is if statements. If statements are used for decision-making operations. It's a body of code which only runs when the condition given in the if statement is true. So the condition we have here is when a is equal to b, we have to double the sum of a and b. In other words, if a is equal to b, return the sum times 2. So right here, that's exactly what we have right here. So if a is equal to b, return the sum times 2. So in our Python basics class, we went over return statements. A return statement ends the execution of the function call and returns a result. The result meaning the value of the expression following the return keyword to the caller. And the return keyword here is sum. So in this case, sum is a plus b, so it will return a plus b. And if we click go, yeah, everything correct.
Right. So that looks like that is all for today. So thank you everyone for watching. Oh, if anyone has any questions, then feel free to ask them right now. And if not, then we will see you not this next Tuesday, but the Tuesday after that. Alright, well, it looks like nobody has any questions. Thank you everyone. Oh, we have some activity on this upcoming Tuesday, so we will not be able to make it. Yep. Thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you then. And remember, do your practice. Thank